My husband's house was built on a foundation of silence. It was a cold, architectural silence calculated in the spaces between marble tiles and the vast expanses of glass overlooking a city that felt a million miles away. It was the silence of wealth, of order, of a life so meticulously arranged it had no room left for a human pulse. I had lived within that silence for 16 years, but my bookstore held a different kind of quiet. It was a warm living silence woven from the scent of aging paper and leather bindings. It was the sacred hush of 1,000 sleeping stories, 1,000 other lives waiting on the shelves. It was a silence that listened, and it was the only place I still felt real. My name is Amelia, and at 47, my own story felt as if it had already been written, bound, and placed on a shelf to gather dust. I was the wife of David Davenport, a man whose ambition was a force of nature, a political hurricane that swept everything into its path. He was on the cusp of a Senate run, and our life was a series of curated photo ops and strategic dinner parties. I, the former journalist with a drawer full of bylines and a fire in my belly, had become his most elegant, reliable prop. He had supported my dream of opening a bookstore, The Last Page, seeing it as a quaint and respectable hobby for a politician's wife. He didn't understand that it wasn't a hobby. It was a sanctuary. It was the last bastion of the woman I used to be. The night it all began, David was in Washington, charming donors. The house was empty, a hollow monument to our marriage. I couldn't bear it. I fled to my bookstore, locking the door behind me, shutting out the world. In the hushed darkness surrounded by my paper and ink companions, I allowed myself to transgress. I poured a generous measure of expensive peat whiskey, a taste from my pre-David life, and put on an old vinyl record of blues music, the sound gritty and soulful and gloriously messy. I was 2 drinks in, lost in the smoky voice of the singer and the glorious burn of the scotch. When a key turned in the lock, my blood ran cold. I froze my glass halfway to my lips. The door swung open, and framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the streetlights, was Ethan. Ethan was David's son, 22 years old, and home for the summer interning at his father's prestigious law firm. He was a creature of sharp intelligence and even sharper cynicism. He had his father's ambition, but none of his faith in the system. He looked at the world with the cool, analytical gaze of a prosecutor, and I often felt as though he were cross-examining my entire life with his silent, knowing eyes. He stepped inside his gaze, sweeping over the scene, the half-empty bottle of Lagavulin, the record spinning on the turntable, and me caught in the act of being someone other than the serene, supportive wife. His eyes, a shade darker than his father's, held no judgment, just a quiet, unnerving understanding. "I didn't realize you were a fan of Howlin' Wolf," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that seemed to vibrate in the book-lined room. Shame washed over me, hot and swift. I felt like a teenager caught breaking curfew. "It's an old habit," I said, my voice tight, as I quickly put down my glass. "I was just closing up." "Were you?" he asked, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. He took a step closer, his presence seeming to shrink the cozy space. He didn't look at the bottle or the record player. He looked at me. "Or were you opening up?" The question disarmed me completely. It was perceptive, incisive, and terrifyingly accurate. In 3 words, he had seen through a facade I had spent 15 years perfecting. I had no defense. He walked over to the record player and gently nudged the needle, letting the song play on. "My father thinks this is just noise. Your father appreciates things that are orderly?" I managed the whiskey, making my tongue feel thick. "He appreciates things he can control," Ethan corrected gently. He turned to face me, his expression serious. He could never control a sound like that. It's too honest. He held my gaze for a moment longer than was proper. "I didn't mean to intrude, Amelia." I saw the light on. I was worried. "No need to be," I said, forcing a brightness into my tone that felt brittle and false. "Just a little late-night inventory." He nodded, but we both knew he didn't believe me. "Well," he said, moving toward the door. The secret of your excellent taste in music is safe with me. He paused at the threshold. Good night. He closed the door and I was alone again. But the silence in the bookstore had changed. It was no longer just listening. It felt as if it was holding its breath. And I knew with a dreadful, exhilarating certainty that Ethan hadn't just stumbled upon me. He had discovered me. The following days were a masterclass in tension. A new awareness thrummed between us, a low-frequency hum beneath the surface of our polite interactions. I saw him at breakfast where he'd ask about my day at the store with an attentiveness that felt like a secret interrogation. I felt his eyes on me during the rare family dinners David attended, a silent conversation taking place across the polished mahogany table while his father pontificated about policy. Ethan started visiting the bookstore in the late afternoons under the pretense of browse. But he wasn't just browse books, he was browse me. He would pull a novel from the shelf and use it as a scalpel. Have you read this one, Amelia? He asked one afternoon, holding up a copy of Anna Karenina, a woman who is everything but is dying of suffocation. Do you think she was selfish or just human? Another time, it was The Great Gatsby. All this for a woman he couldn't have. He built an empire just to get her attention. Do you think it's possible to want something so much that the wanting becomes more important than the thing itself? Every question was a probe. Every literary discussion, a thinly veiled analysis of my life, of his father's life. He was dismantling my carefully constructed reality page by page, and he was doing it with a surgeon's precision. It was terrifying. And no one had paid this much attention to my mind, to my soul, in over a decade. The physical boundary was crossed on a sweltering July afternoon. I was trying to place a heavy leather-bound volume onto a high shelf stretching on my tiptoes. "Allow me," his voice said from directly behind me. I hadn't even heard him approach. I started, my balance faltering. He reached out his hands, landing lightly on my waist to steady me. A bolt of pure electricity shot through me, hot and sharp. My breath caught in my throat. He was so close I could feel the warmth of his body, smell the faint clean scent of his cologne mixed with the aroma of old paper. He easily took the book from my hands and slid it into place. But his hands lingered at my waist for a fraction of a second too long. It was a minuscule hesitation, a barely perceptible pause, but in the charged space between us, it was a confession. "Thank you," I whispered, stepping away as if from a flame. My skin tingled where he had touched me. "Anytime," he said, his voice a low murmur. His eyes were dark, and they held a knowledge that made my heart hammer against my ribs. He knew the effect he had on me. The true nature of the stakes was revealed a week later. David was hosting a fundraiser at our home for his campaign. It was a suffocating affair filled with plastic smiles and political maneuvering. I was playing my role as the perfect hostess, my face aching from the effort. Ethan was there looking impossibly handsome and bored in a tailored suit. And Maya was there. Maya was Ethan's on-again, off-again girlfriend, a fellow law student, and an intern at a rival firm. She was ambitious, beautiful, and sharp as broken glass. I saw the way she watched Ethan and the way she watched Ethan watch me. Her eyes missed nothing. Later in the evening, I escaped to the quiet of the library. Ethan found me there standing by the window. "Tired of the performance?" he asked softly. "I think my face might be permanently stuck in the smile," I admitted with a weak laugh. "You don't have to do this, you know," he said, his voice serious. "Do what support my husband." "Pretend," he countered. "Pretend that this is the life you wanted. Pretend you're happy." He took a step closer. "I see you, Amelia, in the bookstore. I see the woman who listens to the blues and drinks whiskey and probably has 1,000 brilliant, dangerous opinions she keeps locked away." His words were like a key turning in a lock deep inside me. Tears pricked my eyes. To be seen so completely, so accurately was both a relief and an agony. "Ethan, you can't." "I can't," what he challenged, his voice dropping. "I can't state the truth. We're a family built on convenient fictions, and you're the most beautiful fiction of all." Before I could respond, Maya appeared in the doorway, a champagne flute in her hand, and a predatory smile on her face. "There you are, Ethan. Your father was just asking for you." Her gaze flicked between us, cold and calculating. She had seen the intimacy of the moment, the dangerous proximity. She filed it away. I saw it happen. The night of the kiss felt inevitable, as if we were characters in a Greek tragedy marching toward our doom. It was 2 days after the fundraiser. I was at the bookstore late again, the silence my only companion. I was rearranging a display when I heard the now familiar sound of his key in the lock. He didn't speak as he walked toward me. The air was thick with everything we had left unsaid. He stopped in front of me, his presence a magnetic force. "I'm tired of talking about characters in books, Amelia," he said, his voice low and intense. "Let's talk about us." "There is no us," I whispered, though the words felt like a lie on my tongue. "Isn't there?" He raised a hand and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from my cheek. The touch was featherlight, but it undid me completely. "Tell me to leave." He challenged, his eyes searching mine. "Tell me you feel nothing when I'm near you. Tell me you're happy with the silence in that mausoleum you call a home. Lie to me, Amelia. Lie to me right now." The words were on my lips. "Go. This is wrong. Leave me alone." But they wouldn't come. My own story, the one I had suppressed for so long, was screaming to be heard. A tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek. He caught it with his thumb. And that simple tender gesture was my undoing. I closed my eyes and leaned into his touch, a silent surrender. His lips found mine. The kiss was not a gentle exploration. It was a raw, desperate acknowledgement of a truth we could no longer deny. It was the release of weeks of unbearable tension, a collision of two lonely souls in a sanctuary of sleeping stories. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, anchoring myself to the first real thing I had felt in years. This was madness. This was ruin. And I welcomed it like a long-lost lover. The end came not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a camera phone and the strategic precision of a political hit. Maya was more clever than I could have imagined. She hadn't confronted me or made threats. She had gathered her evidence. A photo of us taken through the bookstore window that night, a grainy but undeniable image of our embrace. She didn't send it to David. She sent it to his chief political rival. The story broke on a small scandalous tidbit in a local political blog. Sources report potential ethics scandal in Davenport campaign involving family member. It was vague, but it was enough. The match had been lit. David came home that evening, his face a mask of stone. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. That would have been too human. Instead, he approached it like a crisis manager handling a PR nightmare. He placed a tablet on the marble island in the kitchen. On the screen was the photo. "Explain this," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. My own voice was gone. The silence in the house rushed and cold and absolute. My lack of a response was all the confirmation he needed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. He wasn't looking at me as his wife, but as a liability, a loose variable that threatened to upend his meticulous calculations. "This isn't about us, Amelia." "It was never about us. This is about years of work. This is about my reputation. You haven't just ruined our marriage. You've handed my opponents a loaded gun and pointed it at my head." He looked at me, then truly looked at me, and I saw nothing but cold contempt. "You will pack a bag. You will go to your sisters in California. My press secretary will release a statement about an amicable separation citing irreconcilable differences. You will not speak to the press. You will not speak to anyone. You will disappear quietly." I was being redacted from my own life. As I stood in our bedroom, the one with the closet full of clothes for a woman I no longer was, I finally understood. I had spent 15 years living in the margins of David's story, a footnote in the grand narrative of his ambition. In my desperate attempt to start a new chapter with Ethan, I had simply become the villain in a different, more public tale, one orchestrated by Maya. I hadn't found my voice. I had just given others a more powerful reason to silence me. In the end, I learned that when you trade your own story for a comfortable place in someone else's, you don't just risk being rewritten. You risk being erased entirely. There are moments in every life that act as a hinge, swinging us onto a path from which there is no return. If you're compelled by the intricate, often heartbreaking choices that define us, subscribe to this channel. The landscape of the human heart is vast and shadowed, and together we can dare to explore its deepest corners. Now tell me in the comments, what is the true cost of silence?